be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, offer no resistance to one who is evil. When someone strikes you on your right cheek, turn the other one as well. If anyone wants to go to law with you over your tunic, hand over your cloak as well. Should anyone press you into service for 1 mile, go for 2 miles. Give to the one who asks of you, and do not turn your back on one who asks to borrow. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your heavenly Father, for he makes his sun rise on the bad and the good, and causes rain to fall on the just and the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what recompense will you have? Do not the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet your brothers only, what is unusual about that? Do not the pagans do the same? So be perfect, just as your heavenly Father is perfect." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus.
I apologize for my distracting voice. I am sick, but I am not dying, so there will be less chanting in today's Mass. Some of you will probably like that, I suppose. Do you remember last Sunday's Gospel? 4 times over, Jesus intensifies, Jesus deepens, Jesus perfects the Mosaic Law, and he does so through a very specific, repeated formula. You have heard it said, I say to you. You have heard it said, do not kill. Jesus says, I say to you, beware of anger festering in your hearts. You have heard it said, do not commit adultery. But Jesus says, I say to you, beware of thoughts of lust. Today, the gospel that we heard from St. Matthew is a culmination, if you will, of that intensification of the Mosaic Law. It sort of comes at the apex when Jesus says, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Now, this is a very difficult and challenging aspect of our faith, and there are many, many things to consider. But I would like to offer one aspect that may help us deepen our love and understanding of Christ's precept that he places on us. Consider these words from the perspective of we who have been wronged. Put yourself in the shoes of someone who has been hurt by someone else. Something has been done to you, something unjust, something wrong. To perpetuate that injury, to perpetuate that wrong, if you will, is to add insult to injury, is an additional tragedy on top of the one that you have already suffered. Now, we do this. We perpetuate that injury and that wrong when we remember it, when we turn it over and over and over again in our mind, when it holds tight in our mind and finds roots in our heart. Now, as good students of the liberal arts will understand, knowledge is not meant to be a simply abstract armchair sort of exercise. What we know turns into what we love. We do not remain unchanged. We love what we choose to remember. So if we remember the wounds, if we remember the injuries, the slights, the sins, the injustices that were done to us, we will love those. If we hold in our minds disappointment, anger, resentment, we will love those things, and we will become bitter, cold, and dark. Our hearts will fall in love with these things. If, on the other hand, we hold in our minds love, mercy, trust, and compassion, and the like, we will love not only those things, which are different ways of saying the grace of God, we will also love that person. There is an anonymous patristic commentary on this passage from St. Matthew. The author writes, "We have seen how murder is born from anger and adultery from desire. In the same way, the hatred of an enemy is destroyed by the love of friendship. Suppose you have viewed a man as an enemy, and yet after a while he has been swayed by your benevolence. You will then love him as a friend. I think that Christ ordered these things not so much for our enemies as he did for us, not because enemies are fit to be loved by others, but because we are not fit to hate anyone. For hatred is the prodigy of dark places. Wherever it resides, it sullies the beauty of sound sense. Therefore, not only does Christ order us to love our enemies for the sake of cherishing them, but also for the sake of driving away from ourselves that which is bad for us. The Mosaic law does not speak about physically hurting your enemy, but about hating your enemy. But see, if you merely hate him, you have hurt yourself more in the spirit than you have hurt him in the flesh. Perhaps you don't harm him at all by hating him, but surely you tear yourself apart. If then you are benevolent to an enemy, you have rather spared yourself than him. And if you do him a kindness, you benefit yourself more than him. This is what being perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect means. To refuse to be mastered, to be corrupted by evil. Now, I don't know what you think of when you heard that last verse from the gospel. When I was a kid growing up, I heard this verse. I associated perfection, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect, with a sort of unreasonable, impossible expectation of never making a mistake, of always loving what is good and true and never talking back to my parents, never cheating on tests, never doing anything wrong without making any sort of mistake. And then, several years ago, a Dominican friar, I forget if it was in a conversation or in a homily, he pointed out, well, the word that is used in Greek doesn't really mean perfect in the way of perfectionism. It means more in the sense of completion, which at the time I thought, oh, that's wonderful. Okay, be complete, right? See completion. Now, shame on me that it wasn't until yesterday that I actually looked at the Greek word that is used for perfect. It's not like I'm only 3 years in, and I don't know, maybe I've never preached on this before. What do you think is the Greek word that Matthew uses for perfect? It's a word that every single UD student should know and does know. Teleoi, which is the adjectival form of the noun telos. Fulfill your nature. That is our purpose. Fulfill your telos. And our purpose, our perfection, is like God's. And who is God? God is a communion of persons. He is not sole and singular. He is a communion of Father, Son, and Spirit, pouring themselves out in love and receiving that love to each other. He is communion. He is love. And vis-a-vis us, his creation, God's telos is mercy. We see this as we will celebrate Lent and culminate on Good Friday and Easter Sunday. The love of God poured out for us. Receive it here each and every day, each and every Sunday, the holy body and blood of Christ. In the sacrament of reconciliation, a merciful and loving Father never tires of receiving back his wayward, beloved children. As we prepare to come forward to receive this great gift of Christ's body and his blood, may we remember and may we love as God remembers and loves.